All right, looks like we're live. Welcome, everyone, to our kickoff MLSecOps Connect Ask the Experts series. We will be hosting an array of these throughout the rest of the year with various experts to talk about building security into AI and the different facets of MLSecOps, which you can learn more about at MLSecOps.com. We know you have a lot of places you could be in the middle of the day on Wednesday, so I personally am very grateful to have you here and congratulate you, applaud you on progressing in your MLSecOps learning journey. So with that, we've got a short amount of time today. We'll dive right in. I have the honor of hosting our expert guest today, Ian Swanson.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Co-founder and CEO of Protect AI. And before we dive into some of the questions that you all supplied prior to or during your registration, we'll just invite Ian to give us a little bit about your background and maybe if you would talk about why you started a company like Protect AI focused on security for artificial intelligence.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me, Charlie. Excited to be here for the first one of these, which I'm sure we'll have many. And it's all about how do we educate the community about the need for security within machine learning and AI. So really cool that we're doing this. So the question is, hey, why did I start a company in the security of AI space? So Protect AI, we started the company about 2.5 years ago. I've been in AI and machine learning for well over 15 years. Had a fintech company that was machine learning backed. We sold that one to American Express and then started a company called datascience.com. And datascience.com was one of the first enterprise software solutions for machine learning. How do you build, train, deploy models at scale? And it's now part of Oracle. And then I was running AI and machine learning as a worldwide leader at AWS. And to get to the answer to your question, I saw risks in AI. At AWS, we had tens of thousands of customers and all of them amazing and many of them mature users of AI with not just hundreds, but really thousands of machine learning models live. But my team, as we were boots on the ground, working with them on their pipelines and their deployments, we saw real security problems. And I fast forward, left AWS, Amazon, and I was at a conference. And I walk into a room and on the subject of the door was cybersecurity. And this particular conference, you can ask anything you want on that subject matter. And there's a lot of experts in that room. And I raised my hand and I said, what about security of AI? And I got a lot of dumbfounded looks and they're like, code's code. And what are you talking about? There's no inherent security risks that we should know about or think about.
Right.
And that's when I was like, you know what? This is a problem that needs to be solved. And so when we started 2.5 years ago, really there was maybe 5 of us companies doing it. Now there's 50 and it's top of mind. It was one of the core conversations of RSA, which is security of AI.
Amazing. Okay. Thank you for that. So we'll dive in with our first question from community member Jayesh. Thank you so much. And that question is, what exactly is security for AI and machine learning, and what are we securing in particular?
Yep. So first, let me back up and talk about AI and machine learning. I'm on calls with chief information security officers every day, every week. And I remember one of these conversations where a CISO said, hey, Ian, we don't do machine learning anymore. We only do AI now. And I was a little bit perplexed by that. And so to back up here, these things are related. AI, you can kind of view as the vehicle for digital transformation, the application, and machine learning models are the powertrain or the engine. And so if we think about that from a state of what are we protecting and what are we trying to secure, we're trying to secure the entire ML development process and AI applications. And when you think about the machine learning development process, it's inclusive of data, it's inclusive of this complex machine learning pipeline, and yes, code. And you're producing models that power these applications. And we need to have visibility, auditability, and security across that entire process and all of these assets. So the last part, of this question is, what are we actually, trying to protect? Yes, the AI apps, the machine learning models, but from what? And so we see attacks that are happening at the model level within the supply chain. So think of that as the ingredients for what you're building and at the point of inference. And so as AI applications are in use with customers and things like chatbots, it's how can you protect, the input and the output and some of the inherent risks that can come with the inference layer.
Got it. Okay. That might be a good transition into another question that we received from Mohammed that kind of double clicks on models and security.
Yep.
And that is, by the way, Mohammed, thank you for the question. What risks do ML models face despite being deployed in an encrypted format using AES 256 encryption, where the model file is decrypted during loading by the ML framework? Example given here is TensorFlow C API.
Yep. So super specific question.
Yes.
And a good one by Mohammed. And what we're really talking about here is model security. And there's a couple ways for us to think about it. There's been a lot of academic papers. You can, if you want, you can actually go to Nicholas Cardellini's blog. He tracks all academic papers in the field of adversarial machine learning. And if you look through those papers over the last, call it 3 to 5 years, they talk about how can I manipulate models, but also how can I extract IP from models? How can I steal the model? Now, what Mohammed's asking right here is, as we are encrypting these right there, can they really be extracted? And is there really risk here? The answer is you've de-risked that quite a bit by encrypting the model. However, you might be solving for how do we steal that IP, but you're not solving for another risk category. And the other risk category within machine learning models is inherent within the model itself. So models themselves are an artifact. So think of it like a container. All of you are scanning containers for issues, for vulnerabilities, for security exploits. We should do the same for a machine learning model. And machine learning models are serialized, and there's many different formats, models. And what this creates is really hidden vulnerabilities that can exist within models. So an example is you can have malicious code or unsafe operators within the model itself. And this can really find its place within models, whether it is being built internally. So think of first-party threats, but also third-party threats. So here's like a question that I would ask, for Mohammed or anybody else, who's listening and part of the MLSecOps community is, are you building all your models from scratch? Or are you starting from a foundation of another model and training it on your own data? So let me give you a quick example here. Many companies pull state-of-the-art foundational models, open source models from places like Hugging Face, which, by the way, Hugging Face is amazing. We really appreciate all the great work that they're doing in AI machine learning. But a lot of people use Hugging Face or can use Hugging Face as an insertion point for exploits, meaning they could put models in there that are malicious, that are unsafe, that when you run that model, whether you're training it on your own data set, you're running it on your local machine or in your cloud, it can run these unsafe operators that can get access to data, access to your cloud credentials, and cause a lot of harm. So to go back to the question here, Mohammed's like, hey, are models really a threat, especially if we're encrypting them? And what's the risk there? Not as much a risk as it relates to adversarial machine learning on model extraction, but you should also think about first-party and third-party threats within the model itself and what malicious code could be hidden there. And you should be scanning models. And there's a lot of solutions. We have some at Protect AI, and there's open source solutions that you can use from Pickle Scan and Model Scan that we put out there that can scan those models for malicious code.
Yeah, exactly. And incidentally, I'm just going to do a shameless plug here for the MLSecOps podcast. We just released an episode this week that talks a bit about that. Yeah, with one of our fellow community members, Adrian Wood. He came on and talked with Dan McInerney and Marcello Salvati. And toward the end of the episode, like second half of the episode, if you check it out, they do talk about model malware and that type of, code that can be found in some of those third-party models that you might download and how they're susceptible, and kind of plus one to what Ian has just shared here with some additional detail. So if you haven't yet, go check that out.
Here's the awesome thing with Adrian. By the way, Adrian can go so much deeper than I can, probably on the technical levels of the model risks. Same with Dan and Marcello, who are amazing. But they're members of the community. You can go in Slack, you can find these people, you can ask more questions, and you can re-engage.
Exactly.
Like this is about continuous learning and knowledge sharing, and the podcast is, awesome and definitely a jump off point, but I would just say continue to engage and ask questions.
Yeah, and go in and make those connections. I mean, that's the whole reason the community is there. So, and I know Adrian would love to hear from you. I'll speak for him here. Okay, awesome. Let's transition maybe to another grouping of questions. There was a theme, a very prevalent theme. We received a few questions around the topic of roles and ownership within AI security. Yep. And so I've got a few for you here. This question is from another MLSecOps community member, Rico. Thank you. And he asks, which roles do you think will play a major role in the future for MLSecOps and AI security? Maybe is it like AI officer, AI security roles?
Yep. It's a good question. So to kind of take a higher level stance on it, I'll tell you what I learned in data science with my previous company, datascience.com, is that, and you've seen this in a lot of old articles about machine learning and data science work where people said it's a team sport. You need to work with the business teams, you need to get access to data engineering, to the ML teams, the scientists that are building the work that gets deployed.
Yeah.
The same thing needs to happen as it relates to security. So, if I were to unpack MLSecOps, it's machine learning, it's security, it's operations. And so you can almost think of that as a team and a role where all those groups need to be working together to make sure that you are shipping and deploying AI that is safe, that can be trusted, and that it's secure. Now, to get into the questions, particularly, what was the name of the person again?
Rico.
Rico? Okay, yes. Awesome. Rico, I'll tell you what we are seeing as a company, and then I will kind of go into what I think the future might be on roles. A year and a half ago to maybe 2 years ago, when we were early in the journey of this company and kind of this new category of cybersecurity, we'd be meeting with CISOs, AppSec professionals. It was the most common roles that we were meeting with. But fast forward to just in the last 6 months or so, our sales funnel and our discussions are mostly with AI security leaders. This is a role now within companies. Like, for example, JP Morgan, huge financial services organization, has a managing director of AI security.
Yeah.
And if you search within LinkedIn, even MLSecOps, which is kind of cool,
yep.
You'll find roles that are popping up. And this particular role, this AI security leader, typically reports into the CISO, sometimes the CIO, and they have budget. But from a team sport perspective, they straddle between usually application security teams, some data security teams, but then the AI teams. So they are the single-threaded owner of how do I secure this? They have budget, but they also are the connective tissue between these two groups that, quite honestly, have not always been at the same table.
Sure.
A lot of AI, and this kind of goes back to a long history, has been in some areas of shadow IT. Not because they want to. They're not hiding anything. It's just that some of these AI tools and processes were relatively new for a lot of organizations, and they weren't quite understanding how they pull it into the rest of their software development life cycles. So it's a new role. It's a great role. And within that, they're building out teams. So these leaders have teams that are focused on areas like, yes, governance, risk, compliance. You might say, why does that fall into security? But again, a single-threaded owner that's managing the risk and the security, an AI security leader. And they're having operational teams that are going back and forth with all these different groups.
Okay, thank you. Another one within the same vein from Jake. Thanks for the question, Jake. How do SecOps shops get ahead of ML and AI issues while not being in the loop on emerging projects in their organizations? And to expand on that, how can we bring the concept of MLSecOps into the conversation with our organizations without an invite to the table? And then an ending comment here from Jake. Security is often seen as an inhibitor to innovations or development in some orgs.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm actually going to work backwards from that list there to with Jake. Security being an inhibitor. So let's focus there. I think we can actually blow that up here and flip the script here for AI and security. I'll give an example. A lot of companies and organizations, especially in highly regulated environments, financial services, healthcare, life science, within the government, they build these walls around, very strict security walls that limit sometimes innovation in AI. I gave the example of Hugging Face before, where state-of-the-art foundational models are being pushed there every single day. Organizations, AI teams within your company, they want access to those models. They want to use it. A lot of organizations that we talk to just wall it off and block access entirely. What security can do is actually say, we have a solution to open it up. And so it brings you to the table to say, if we create secure gateways, that we can scan these models as they come in from shared repositories like Hugging Face and enable you the AI team. You become a friend and not a foe, on that side.
Right.
And at that point, I don't want to say earned your right to the table, but you have come in from a positive aspect and not always looked at as, hey, you're trying to inhibit me, there.
Yeah, and suddenly the value is very apparent.
Completely. And it forms like a stronger partnership. Another area that I would state on this one is education is needed. I was recently meeting with a very large software company, and they had the research team on the call, the AI research team, and they had the security team on a call. 2 different rooms, a Zoom call. And the research team didn't seem like they were paying much attention as we were going through the threats and the risks. Finally, they went off mute. They looked at the camera and they said, Ian, everything you're talking about doesn't really resonate with us because we're the research team. We're exploring with AI, but we're not putting it in production. Now, the application security team went off mute and they said, hang on. Are you pulling in models from other places? And are we scanning them before you're running them on your local machine or in the cloud? You may not be putting them in production, but you are running these models. And in this case, the AI research team said, yeah, of course. Like we're experimenting, we're research, we're development, we're pulling in state-of-the-art models from all over the place. We're training it on sample data sets, within these environments. And the application security team is, don't you realize then you just put those environments at risk? You put our data at risk. We put our systems, at risk. And the research team said, no, we didn't know. And so that goes back to knowledge and education. And I think it's a two-way street here. I think if security were to lean in, the security teams, and say, here are the threats, here are the risks, it will open the mind. And I think you could be an enabler, of these AI teams to get access to technologies that perhaps are walled off today, and vice versa. The AI teams can meet with the security teams and walk them through their processes. Again, in this example, the application security team had no idea of what the research team was doing, so that together you come to the table to figure out solutions, and you're doing things, again, in a safe, trusted, and a secure way.
Yeah, that's a fantastic message. And that's one that I've tried to share or push home, but probably haven't articulated as well as what you just did within the MLSecOps community, which is that MLSecOps is built of team members from different groups in an organization, and it has to be cross-collaborative, and that knowledge sharing piece has to be there. So it's, the developer teams, researchers, security, but sometimes even individuals from other members of the organization that you might not have expected, like HR, to consult briefly on a particular project about bias in a hiring algorithm, or maybe someone from legal coming in to consult for something like that. And so, there's core groups, of course, security and the practitioners, but other members that you might need to bring in to have these conversations and help share knowledge.
I mean, the nice thing is, as I said before, one of my friends, DJ Patel, who helped coin the term data scientist when he was a leader at LinkedIn back in the day. I'm dating myself and probably him. But, he talked about it being a team sport. And so the nice thing is data science is rooted in being a team sport. And now we just need to open it up to make sure that one of the players on the pitch is security. And so I think that there's a way that people would want to welcome this. And there's a way to insert yourself in that discussion that you are an enabler and not an inhibitor.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just looking back at Jake's question here, and one final call out I wanted to make related to how to bring the concept of MLSecOps into your organization without an invite to the table. Coming back to the community piece, invite colleagues who will find this information relevant or share. We're going to have this live stream available on demand afterward. Share it with folks, get the information around, and get yourself invited into those conversations by sharing information like this is a great way as well. So thanks again for the question, Jake. Next, Cow, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing any of these names. Y'all call me out in Slack. Is curious if MLSecOps roles, Ian, are entry level, and if there's a career roadmap for this position, these positions, what projects might people engage in to showcase their skills to recruiters for MLSecOps?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's really a career question and a career trajectory question, and how do you get your foot in the door? Mm-hmm. What I will say, and what I'm seeing within the largest companies of the world, is that there is a need for people that understand security of AI. Now, obviously, I'm biased in terms of my data set because I run a security of AI company, But, you see it, in the news, whether it's Microsoft and Amazon and OpenAI and others talking about building out red teaming groups around AI. You can even just do a simple search in LinkedIn and you'll see these AI security leadership roles and MLSecOps roles. And I think there's a gambit of, a wide range from entry level to, again, super senior, like managing director at JP Morgan Chase, which is a very senior role at a company like that. So there's a lot of opportunity to, yes, you can get in early, but also you can grow and you can make this a career, which is really cool. Now, the other thing that makes this so interesting is that it's relatively new. It's new in understanding, but it's also based on a knowledge of two categories that have been around for a while, AI and security. And so if your background is security, then I would say start to understand and learn more about AI and machine learning. Understand what that development lifecycle is and how it's different than your other software that you're developing, so that you can take your mindset that as a security professional and start to apply it to where you think the holes are from a risk perspective. Now, on how to showcase work, there's a couple ways. As I interview and look for people to add to protect AI, I love when people are putting together content. Like, be a thought leader. And even if you think your audience particularly might be 5 people, 50 people, or 500 or 5,000 people, put out content. It really shows how you think about a problem, how you might be looking to solve that problem. It demonstrates the level of research, and how you're diving deep into the subject matter. That, to me, is just as good or better than a resume, that you put together. And then some people even go as far as creating GitHub projects where they have some, sample test cases. They're pulling in other open source, modifying it, especially if you're going down engineering paths within this category. But there's a lot of tool sets that you can piece together for content, for prototypes, and ways for you to experiment so that you can round out your skill set. That means a lot more than your resume, because to be quite clear here, a lot of people don't have AI security on their resume because this is a brand new market segment within cybersecurity.
Right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Switching lanes slightly, there was some input from the community related to red teaming themes. So for one example, our member Nataraj had a question: is adversarial testing part of cyber response? And then part 2, if you could talk a little bit about red teaming for AI, because I think there's some not controversy, but you see online a lot of back and forth about what exactly that is.
Yeah.
And how you.
What is it? What are you doing? And all that. So let me start with, so the ownership of red teaming, it depends on the org. That's a hard one for me to answer, but let me talk to you about some areas that I think is a little bit of snake oil and what's real and where to get started on red teaming. Going back 2.5, 3 years ago, AI security was mostly in this category of what's called adversarial machine learning. Can I manipulate the outcome of a model? Can I poison it? Can I exfiltrate, data or the model IP in and of itself? When you read a lot of those academic papers, a lot of them were carrying out these attacks in a clean room with perfect knowledge of the system. They weren't rate limited on the attacks they were doing, maybe at the point of inference. They knew exactly how the model was trained, and so therefore they're able to carry out the attacks. Well, if you think about it in a reality perspective, just simple rate throttle or API throttling, on this, you kill the vast majority of these attacks. So I wouldn't start there from a red teaming perspective in your kind of typical adversarial machine learning, which you mentioned, way. But I would focus on the areas that I do think are incredibly risky, on this. Number one, the supply chain. There are a lot of elements within the supply chain that are not enumerated within your other tools, tools that are scanning dependencies, for example. So we found risks, and so did other companies, but we found critical vulnerabilities in things like MLflow that are used within your pipeline. But if you look, MLflow is not enumerated in a lot of your other systems. So therefore, even if you knew about the risk, you wouldn't be able to find it. So there are solutions and things out there, new scanners. We have something that's open sourced. It's called AI exploits. But there's templates there in which you can find these assets. You can attack them and see if they're susceptible to risk. So again, supply chain. And the last comment on supply chain is supply chain are the core ingredients and extremely important within AI and machine learning. A lot of AI and machine learning is built on the core of and the dependency of these open source elements. So red team those. The other area, and I'm going to go to a completely different spectrum on this, is large language models. So you can and you should red team large language models from a evaluation perspective. So to compare against LLMs to each other for your particular use cases, and they will be use case specific, on that. You also need to take a look at LLMs, as it relates to benchmarking, and going at these, in a way that we are attacking to say, are we able to exfiltrate information from them? How are they acting across governance, risk, compliance challenges within there? But there's a lot that you can and you should be doing on LLM red teaming. And if you search that, we have a lot of discussions happening and going to happen, I think, within MLSecOps on red teaming for LLMs. That's really important because companies today are evaluating LLMs to put in production. That's what's happened in 2024. 2025 is like deployment for internal use cases, external use cases, and there's going to be a constant need to red team those LLMs because every week, every month, there's going to be a new state-of-the-art model. And you're always going to have a benchmark and a comparison to previous results and make sure that you're not putting in a model that is not safe, cannot be trusted, and is not secure. And red teaming is critical in large language models.
Right. Right on the heels of that, and you might have already answered a little bit of this in your last answer, but what's the best source of information to collect vulnerability data on LLM models or just AIML in general? This question comes from CJ. Thank you.
Cool. So this is like a resource question of, where can we learn and where can we see where vulnerabilities are? Our mission at Protect AI is to help our customers build a safer AI-powered world. And a couple of things we do. I mean, we sell products. You can go to our website, use our products, which are great, by the way. But we operate a 15,000 person threat research community called Hunter. And every day, these hunters are doing two things. They're finding security exploits, vulnerabilities, but they're also working with maintainers to fix the problem. And so, it's a two-way street in terms of finding the issue, fixing the issue. The insights from this Hunter team, this Hunter group, this community are unbelievable. And so we turned it into a product that you can go to today with no subscription called Sightline. So sightline.protectai.com. And you can get these latest vulnerabilities every day, every month, but beyond what you find in what's called the National Vulnerability Database. We are a CNA. We report these as critical, as CVEs. They get into the National Vulnerability Database, but the NVD gives you a little bit of information just by the basis of how it's set up. Within Sightline, we go much further. We give you an overview, an attack path. We even give you tools, nuclei templates, that you can use. That was our way to kind of be forward leaning to help of our mission of building an AI safer powered world, or safer AI powered world. But it's not just us. There are others, that are also producing very valuable assets and resources. MITRE Atlas has a lot of great, yes, a framework, but also case studies and challenges, that you will see there. And I know we're going to see a lot more vulnerability databases across not just libraries, which is what we're finding with Hunter and Sightline, open source, but also models themselves and data sets. This is going to be an area where there's going to be a lot more research, a lot more opportunity to learn, and resources that are going to be available for you to use.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay. Let's jump over to talk a bit about open source.
Cool.
And maybe some more of Protect AI's tools. I know the answer to this already, but maybe you could talk a little bit about some of Protect AI's open source offerings where community members could get started with AI security.
Cool. So by the way, open source is super important for AI and machine learning. Yep. Again, we see amazing companies like Hugging Face, that are helping prop this up as the essential building blocks of AI and machine learning. But also, NVIDIA, Triton Inference Server, Databricks, MLflow, TensorFlow, PyTorch, all of these are super well respected AI ML projects, that are open source, and have vast communities around it. We wanted to participate in that as well. And so at Protect AI, we have 5 open source projects, from LLM security to model security, so scanning models for malicious code, to even scanning notebooks for vulnerabilities or license issues on dependencies, and yes, red teaming in terms of AI exploits, templates, that you can use. So for us, it was a way to give back to the community. What I can say is I actually know that large security incumbents use our open source, which is great. I'm glad we're, again, helping with the mission overall of the company. But it's also a place where a lot of customers and just individuals want to kind of test and see what the challenges are, there. And we have open communities in Discord and elsewhere, that people are able to communicate with us about it. Yep. But it's a way for us to give back in this space and also participate in what is critical in AI development, which is open source software.
Awesome. Madav wants to learn, what are some techniques employed by Protect AI's LLM Guard for efficient and cost-effective CPU and GPU inferences?
Super specific question.
Great question.
Yeah, it's a good question. So LLM Guard, first and foremost, is one of our LLM open source projects. It came from a team called Layer that we amazingly were able to have join Protect AI in our mission. And LLM Guard, helps in terms of looking through use cases on the input and the output of large language models with over 30 different scanners. So what do I mean by that? You can scan and you can see if someone's trying to do a prompt injection attack. You can see if someone's trying to include invisible text, within the prompt. And on the output is the large language model giving a user, for example, a malicious URL. And all of these things, Layer, pun intended, can be combined, with each other, so you have multiple scans. So the challenge here, that it was Mohammed, I think. Was that correct?
Oh, I'm Madav.
Madav? All right.
Yes.
So what he's talking about here is super important, which is, hey, Ian, what about latency? And what are the challenges here? Because we're essentially in this space, you almost talk like what could be a firewall. You could do this async as well, but if you create this firewall, you're putting models, you're putting scanners in front of another model, on that side. And so there's this kind of 3 aspects that are really complicated within this space. Number 1 is latency on that. Number 2 is cost. Number 3 is accuracy. Well, you're trying to have the fastest solution at the lowest cost with the highest accuracy. That's a challenge on that side. So this question specifically is, what are we doing to help, across those items? So in this particular question, I did ask Charlie ahead of time because people were giving questions as they were registering. I was like, hey, Charlie, if anything's very specific technical, give me that one question ahead of time so I can make sure I can go back to our teams, what we're doing.
Right.
In this case, I know we're doing a lot, in terms of what we could do to improve this. But I wanted to specifically share what the team that we have working on Layer has been doing in this space and what you can utilize right now. Alexander, who helped create this project with Neil, 2 amazing technologists, individuals that were concentrated on this space. Olex gave me 4 things, on this. Number 1 is we convert our models to Onyx versions. So that improves, if you will, the CPU latency by about 30% and GPU by 10 to 15%. We're also batching and doing parallel workers to utilize GPU memory better and increase the throughput. The third item he said is we do provide options to use lighter models, lighter versions, if you will. And so that's like Distilbert, Deberta V3 small. So these use a lot less memory. They can be faster. They can be more performant, if you will, or cost efficient. And then last is that we're just constantly experimenting here. What I've told our team and what we're investing is this is a treadmill. This is an area that we're always going to have best-in-class scanners. We're always going to be having to do research and development within this space. And we're always going to be having to work with our open source community to improve this project and others.
Right. Awesome. Thank you. We have about 10 minutes left here, so probably time for 1 or 2 more questions. Let's move to another question from Rico, thank you, which is looking at the future a bit. How do you see the threat landscape changing in the future, or what do you think will change?
So a couple things. First and foremost, security people, like let's say at RSA, big security conference that was in May, a lot of them are coming to the booth and in conversations and really interested in LLM security. And then we start talking about the supply chain. We start talking about models themselves, and their eyes open and they expand in terms of their knowledge and say, you're right. Those are potential threat surfaces that we need to be looking at as well, to be able to protect. So I think this space from a security professional's, perspective is going to increase quite a bit to encompass, if you will, all of the elements of building a machine learning model and AI applications. So again, supply chain, the models themselves. So we're going to see this kind of breadth, if you will, of this space. There's going to be a buzz term, and it already kind of is, of AI security posture management.
Oh, yeah.
So a play on what we see in cloud security posture management. And this is just really, let's have visibility, auditability, and security across every single one of these elements, that is in the development lifecycle. We need to have an inventory of every model, every application, every data set, all the pipelines, and have a secure posture across all of those key entities, this. And the last thing that I would state is, where's the threats really going to expand? It's going to expand when these models are talking to agents and agents are taking on tasks. So what I mean by that is, and I gave this example recently at the Collision conference in Toronto. Recently, I've been researching a trip in Europe for my family. We're going to Switzerland. It's kind of a bucket list trip for my daughters. And I knew nothing about an itinerary agenda. So I went into ChatGPT and I was like, hey, give me a great agenda for like 5 days there.
Nice.
But what I would love to have it do is like, can you just go book that for me? Like, given these certain parameters. But if you think about that, it has to have access to like my payment information, a lot more personal information about me, my family. It's connecting the dots into travel companies, airlines, all of these things, which is going to be amazing to be able to, let's say, improve the experience of like the time I have research and doing this. It's going to make it an unbelievable quick thing to do, but it also puts all of those connection points at risk, perhaps.
Puts those connection points at risk.
Yeah.
It puts your data out there.
So I think agents, as it relates to AI, is going to be a big topic area and theme as it relates to AI security as we look even to the end of this year, but also well beyond.
Yep. Exactly. I don't think we're going to get to everyone's questions. We will be sending a follow-up to this event and maybe can answer a couple more there. But for the live session today, Ian, is there anything that we didn't touch on? Maybe a question from the community that they should have asked, but they didn't?
Yeah.
Any final thoughts you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I think from a final thought perspective, and just to kind of recap and kind of pull through a thread, AI security is incredibly important. Why? It's because AI is a fundamental thing that is being integrated throughout all companies right now. If you think about it, a large financial services institution, a bank, anytime money is moved around, a machine learning model is involved, period. And so these are incredibly important systems, that we need to be able to protect, that we need to be able to make sure that are safe, that are secure, that can be trusted on that. So point number one is super important space, that all of you are in and starting perhaps even new career paths, which is great. Then wrap this is my final comment tied to that is there should be no AI within the enterprise without security of AI. Now, I know this can sound a little bit, selfish because I run a security AI software company, but that is a reality that I know, having worked with tens of thousands of customers, deploying not just hundreds, but thousands of models, is we need to have visibility, auditability, and security of those. There's no reason why we should not. We must protect AI commensurate to the value that it delivers.
That's a great line. All right, groovy. My final thoughts that I'll end with, again, thank you so much for being here today. Ian, it was an honor to kick this off with you. We are going to have way more of these sessions. MLSecOps Connect, Ask the Experts. This is the first one. There will be many more this year. Those will be announced in the MLSecOps Slack space and also our supplemental community space that you can find by going to MLSecOps.com. If you have more questions, +1 to what Ian said earlier, join one of those spaces, ask your fellow community members. We're there. Other members of the Protect AI team are there, as well as other organizations. So this is definitely a collaborative effort. And we will talk to you all again very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, everybody.